This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. First up today, Pedro Santos, founder and CEO of OsComp Systems, an exciting compression company with technology to reduce the footprint and decrease the capital expense at the well site. Next up, David Mather, President and CEO of MTPV Power Corporation, this innovative company using semiconductor chips to convert heat into electricity. All that right after this.
At BKD, we understand the constantly shifting nature of the energy industry. As a national CPA and advisory firm, we serve energy clients from the beginning to the end of the cycle. Our experienced energy advisors serve approximately 300 energy companies in exploration, midstream, downstream, oilfield services, and power production. Plus, we're the largest North American member of the Praxity Global Alliance, which means we can help you wherever you operate. Contact a BKD advisor or visit us online to learn more.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Pedro Santos, founder and CEO of OsComp Systems. Pedro, great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
So tell us about OsComp.
So OsComp is a company that's dedicated to doing near isothermal multi-phase compression. And we spun out of MIT a few years ago in order to try to find how to improve the efficiency of compressors, because for a very long time we've basically had the same exact thing in the oil and gas industry. It's all been piston compressors for the last 100 years.
All right, so it's not piston driven.
That's correct. I mean, piston compressors are what you would typically have in your engine, and what we have is a rotary high pressure compressor. So we have a single rotor that is spinning concentrically, so you actually have no shifting of the center of rotation like you have in a Wankel. This is actually a completely different way to operate a rotary compressor. And you're able to do very high pressures because it actually leverages the fact that you have only one chamber, and that concentric rotation leads to a very balanced rotating operation.
All right, so are there other rotary-based compressors?
Absolutely. The rotary screw was introduced probably around 30 years ago, and has taken over a lot of the low pressure applications. So if you look for a compressor that can do 200 pounds of discharge, then typically you'll go with a rotary screw. I mean, piston compressors are rarely seen in those applications, but what happens is as soon as you break that barrier, then you're stuck. The only option that you have until you get to massive refinery size compressors is your piston compressor. So our machine is actually designed to replace a lot of these applications where your only choice was a piston compressor.
So tell me why that matters. Why does your technology make a difference?
So there are a lot of things that are different now in what you have to do with compression and in order to produce oil and natural gas that you didn't have to deal with before. For example, a lot of the reservoirs that are being actively sought by the operators are liquids rich, or they have gas and oil with them. So when you get these multi-phase or multiple components to the surface, typically what you do onshore is that you separate them, and then on one side you take the liquids, on the other side you take the gas.
Right.
Offshore, where the reservoirs are highly pressurized, actually you are used to taking it out of the wellhead in a single pipe and moving it in a single pipe to the separation and production facilities. So what our technology does is it allows you to keep everything in a single stream, no emissions. So think of EPA regulations and how strict they're becoming nowadays.
Sure.
And you reduce the footprint. So if you think of a lot of areas where you weren't used to oil and gas production as intense as like areas like in North Dakota or in the Marcellus.
Right.
Well, instead of seeing these huge tank batteries and a lot of infrastructure and a lot of activity, all you're going to see is a very small box like a standby generator out in the field, and everything else is going to be a single pipe.
All right, so your device works on both gas and liquids together.
Absolutely, and the reason why we can do it, so in a typical compressor, you have a physical reduction of the volume, and if you try to reduce the volume of a liquid, you're basically going to have mechanical failure.
Sure.
So in our case, what our compressor does is it has a sweeping motion that basically directs the liquid towards the exhaust, And when the pressure inside of the chamber is higher than that of the outside, there's an automatic valve mechanism that just discharges everything. So having liquids together with a gas doesn't create any of the mechanical failures that you would have in a typical compressor.
All right, and it reduces both the footprint and the capital expenditure at the well side.
Absolutely. So basically, before you had to install two separate pipelines, one for the oil or one for the gas, or you have to spend a lot of money on both tanks to collect the oil and the liquids, and then trucks to basically take them out.
Right.
So now you have a single production line, which you would have had to install for the gas anyways, and you can flow both the liquids and the gas in that pipe, smaller diameter, and you're able to use all of the well's natural energy and just boost it just enough so that you have enough energy to take it through that pipeline.
Well, how does a startup go up against the competition of the majors in an area that, as you say, hasn't seen innovation in a number of years?
Well, precisely because the area hasn't seen a large amount of innovation, we actually come in from a very different angle. We're not creating just a more efficient compressor, but we're actually enabling you to produce resources in a different way than you were thinking of producing them before. So it's basically changing the amount of capital needed to produce a whole field from, say, $1 billion down to $300 million, for example. I mean, it's really a game-changing application that the incumbents have a hard time struggling. They struggle in order to realize how to react to that. So hopefully we do create new applications where some fields that would have been uneconomical with current technology are now going to be enabled with our compressor.
MIT startup found its way to Houston, Texas.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there is an incredible opportunity in the energy industry right now where you can have a reduction or an impact in the environment and also make it economically friendly. And when you look at unconventionals and the revolution that natural gas has created, I looked at that as the opportunity to build the rest of my career.
Well, I'm excited about what you're doing. Welcome to Houston. Glad you're growing. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much, Paul.
And that wraps our discussion with Pedro Santos. We'll be back with more right after this.
Welcome to this edition of The Power of People, where we explore how to bring out the best in your valuable assets. My name is Robin Knowles. I am the President and CEO of TDS, the Workforce Performance Experts. Today we're speaking with Melissa Lassiter on employee turnover. Nice to see you, Melissa.
Oh, thanks for having me, Robin.
So employee turnover, historically, employees stayed at their companies pretty much their whole career. Now it seems like employees are jumping ship, every 3 to 5 years. What's going on?
That's absolutely true. We're seeing that in many industries, and that turnover is incredibly costly because organizations spend a great deal of time and effort and money getting those employees up to speed and getting them trained. And when they leave, all of that knowledge walks away with them.
Wow, well, how costly is it?
It's very costly. One of the studies I was reading recently estimates that it's roughly equal to one person's their annual salary. So for each employee that leaves, their annual salary walks out the door with them.
So what can a company do about that?
The most important thing we can do really is to improve the job satisfaction.
How would you do that?
Well, I think one important place to start is to start with your supervisors. One study I was reading recently said that 48% of the people polled stayed at their current position because they had a positive, supervisor-worker relationship. So I think if we can build an environment that's comfortable, where the person feels valued and where they feel like there is an investment with their supervisor, I think you're going to have a higher likelihood that they're going to stay.
But what about pay?
That's always a good question. No matter what we do, employees are always going to figure out how much other people are making. And when you find there are other people in the company who are making more money than you to do the same type of job, that can lead to feelings of frustration. So I think making sure that pay is equitable and fair is a really important piece.
So what can an employer do when an employee comes on board?
I think during the interview process is where this really needs to start. One of the most important things we can do is be honest with that person. Don't just tell them the positive things about the position, tell them the real story about the position. Tell them the pros, the cons, so they know what they're getting into. Because if a person accepts a job thinking it's one thing and it turns out to be something else, there's a probability they're going to feel like they've been misled and they're going to feel frustrated, and again, will probably look elsewhere.
Very understandable. Well, thank you so much for the information today, Melissa.
Thanks for having me.
This has been another edition of The Power of People. Join us again next time to learn more about what you can do to develop excellence in your workforce while getting the best possible ROI from your human capital.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, David Mather, President and CEO of MTPV Power Corporation. David, great to have you on the program.
Oh, thanks for having me again. Nice to see you.
What's been happening with the company?
A lot of things. Really exciting time for us. We make semiconductor chips that convert heat directly to electricity. So we're a clean tech company and a semiconductor. So waste heat is our first market. So taking any type of waste heat from a laptop computer all the way to a glass factory, taking that heat and converting it directly to electricity. Because we're using chips. We have no moving parts. We solid state engines, basically. And 2 years ago, we were at a point where it was time to actually move our chip production into the commercial world. We're making the chips ourselves, and it was a pivotal point for us in order to really get the high energy and the high power electricity out of these chips. We needed to make cleaner chips. They needed to be made in a commercial foundry, not so much in the internal lab work which we were doing. So it's a very pivotal point for us in change.
Well, and I was excited to have you back because it's been a tough time for clean tech companies over the last 2 years, yet you found success through a fairly innovative business model.
Yeah, raising money has been very difficult, in the past several years, across the board. When you add clean tech to it and semiconductor, those are the two big negatives, right? Both industries have tended to require enormous amounts of capital to be successful. So we chose to build a model much like you would see in the IT industry. We're a fabless semiconductor company, which means we don't own a foundry. We don't have to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars to create a foundry.
Smart.
Right? We use existing foundries to build our chips. Any MEMS foundry today out there could make our chips, as well as there are several other PV manufacturers that make some of our chips. So that's a big help for us.
Well, and it's a reason that you've been a success where others haven't found success over the last 2 years. And you mentioned the fundraising. You've even then, 2 years ago, had done a great job compiling a shareholder base and a board of varsity athletes. How has that changed?
So, we, I think last time we talked, Applied Materials was one of our strategic investors, which was really big for us.
Sure.
And, shout out to Applied. They've been a fantastic partner. And for, everybody loved the clean energy story. Taking free fuel, right? We have enormous amounts of waste heat in the world.
Right.
It's estimated to be $1 trillion market worldwide. All of this free energy. So the clean energy story is wonderful. Everybody loves it.
Sure.
But then they're a little nervous about, well, wait a minute, you're doing this with chips. Right. So when you get an Applied Material partnering with you, then it kind of takes a little bit of the edge off of, well, I don't have to worry about the chips. Right. So that's been real helpful for us. And then Northwater Capital came in as well, who is basically an IP fund. They invest in companies with heavy intellectual property.
Sure.
But also with an eye towards energy as well. They have several energy investments. They do a lot of co-investing with the sponsor of the show and several other folks. So it's been exciting to have a good, solid group of investors that believe in what we're doing, and they've been really supportive.
Well, one more big change that we've seen over the last few years is this advent of inexpensive natural gas and finding cheap natural gas in places. How, since you're in the power market, how has that inexpensive or more plentiful natural gas affected the business? Yeah,
that's a great story and a big conversation around the clean energy world, right? Well, what the natural gas folks need is a way to create electricity without bringing in a turbine. Right?
It's true.
Right. So we have the ability with our chips to make solid state engines, something as small that is fit in the palm of my hand, or something that could fit in a car, or even a large industrial solution that you could take natural gas and use a solid state engine, no moving parts, no noise, no vibration, and convert that natural gas directly to electricity. So what we're talking about is taking chips, again, enclosing them in a housing, and using something like natural gas, compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas, or even gasoline, and using that fuel to create heat inside this solid state box. So this is a box solid state, meaning no moving parts. Just have chips in them. We take that heat, convert it to electricity. So imagine a modern day hybrid that has a gas engine and batteries. Take the gas engine out, which is very heavy, put a very small, lightweight box in there with no moving parts. And using that, to charge your batteries.
All right, so when might we see something like that?
Yeah, so, as I mentioned, our first product is for the high temperature industrial waste heat market. Our next product will be, really refining these more efficient chips that could be used in this type of environment. So I'd say, in the next maybe 2 or 3 years, you'll see us coming out with gas-fired solid-state engines.
What's a plan for the company over the next year?
Yeah, so right now we're really driving performance with our chips. So we have some great chip partners that are making our chips for us. In fact, we're about to bring on another household name that will be making our chips for us. We're real excited about that. Hopefully we can announce that quite soon. Really getting the performance as high as we can so we can enter the market. So this year is all about scaling and driving performance. Right now we're really excited about our performance. It's growing very, very fast. And really we hope to be in the market with our first product, our first waste heat product, which is really for the industrial area, glass plants, cement plants. We hope to be selling about 24 months from now.
All right, so let's say I own a glass plant,
okay,
and I want to bring your technologies in. What is it that I'm getting, and what's the return on my investment?
Wonderful thing about a glass plant, our product goes into their waste stream. Right? It goes into the tunnels that are exhausting all of their waste heat. So we don't take up any room in their environment. But a glass plant, putting in, say, 10 of our square meter panels, as an example,
right,
their capital equipment would be paid for in the second to third year.
Wow.
And they would be producing power at 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour on a fixed basis over, say, 10-year period.
Incredible.
Very compelling, because the fuel cost is free. We don't impact their manufacturing environment. And you can't fight 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour for power.
No, you can't.
Especially if you're in California.
Well, exciting times, and thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, my pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And that wraps this episode of the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com. I'm Paul Dickerson, and we'll see you next week.